I was born, my mother gave me up for adoption. I lived in about 7 or 8 foster homes. I got starved and beaten a lot.
He had no family. He had no stability in his life. That was a recipe for disaster.
I just decided I don't want to feel like I'm weak or anything like that.
Wrestling is the oldest sport known to man. It's two human beings imposing their will on one another.
Lean back, nice job, Zion.
Other teams would make comments to other wrestlers. He worked so hard and he thought he failed, but he was one of the biggest successes that I've ever had.
Zion Clark, Breaking Barriers. The severity of one's disability does not determine their level of potential. The greatest barriers that people with disabilities have to overcome are not steps nor curbs. It's expectations, Dan Gable once said. Long ago, black people were being treated unfairly every day, especially black people with some kind of disability that would set him or her off from everyone else. In 1997, a man named Zion Clark was born. Little did he know one day he was going to change the world for the better in his life of overcoming a horrific disability. Zion was born in Columbus, Ohio on September 29, 1997. Zion was born with caudal regression syndrome, a condition that impairs development of the lower half of the body. 1 out of every 100,000 kids every year are born with this disability. Given up for adoption as a baby, Clark was bounced around from foster home to foster home. It was not the ideal situation, the wrestler said. At his first foster home, they let him wrestle, then they decided they did not want to take care of him anymore. He was bouncing from foster home to foster home, wanting to hopefully find a true foster family that would want him. Until one day a lady named Kimberly Hawkins heard about a boy with no legs looking for a family. This little boy had nothing, no one, except for his big heart, which enlightened anyone who cared to truly get to know him. Kimberly took him in with her daughter and 2 adopted daughters. The first few months were rough because he wasn't used to any family that would actually care for him in a safe environment, unlike all the other foster homes he had been in before that just downed on him, putting in his head he was worthless. But for Kimberly and her over-enthusiastic personality, it only took a little time for Zion to realize she was a good person and open up to her like she was his real mother. Zion started wrestling when he was 7 years old. The first day at his new school in 2nd grade, the wrestling coach came up to him at lunch and asked him if he wanted to wrestle. He went home that day and asked his foster family, so they said yes. From that day on, Zion found a passion in the hard work and intensity of wrestling. He liked wrestling, but never got any better all the way up to high school. Day after day, he was getting beaten wrestling, which made him only want to work harder. He continued his passion of wrestling at Massillon High School. After his first tournament of his freshman year, he went to his foster mom and asked her if he could get a tattoo. So she said, "You can, but it better be very meaningful to you." So the next day, he went out and got one that said "No excuses." This meant the world to him because with no excuses came the fact that he will never turn down anything because of his disability. Another quote from Zion was, "The obstacles you face are mental barriers which can be broken by adopting a more positive approach." In high school, as a freshman and sophomore, he had 0 wins. As a junior, things started to change. He started doing well in matches. As a senior, he went 33-15 in Massillon High School. In his last match at districts of senior year, he lost by 1 point, and when the match was over, the crowd stood up and cheered him on because even though he lost the match, he won the passion and standing ovation of the crowd. Zion made his way on to the University of Kent State to wrestle and have a major in business financials. The school's wrestling team is called the Golden Eagles, and his coach is Dave Schlarm. He was Kent State's starting 125-pound wrestler. His coach likes him so much, he said, "Zion is one of the most coachable wrestlers I've ever had. He has changed the lives of so many people, from his family to his friends to random people he has talked to, and everyone around the world who has seen him or heard his amazing story." He has stopped wrestling at Kent State for the time being to train to be in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics for wrestling. Zion is also going to compete in the 2020 Paralympic Games in Tokyo as a sprinter with other wheelchair-bound athletes. The Paralympics are a multi-sport events involving athletes with a range of disabilities from loss of limbs to mental disabilities like autism to people with Down syndrome. In the 1900s, the U.S. Congress passed several laws to help people with disabilities. It was called the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 that prohibits unfair treatment of individuals in programs or activities. This was made to help those people in these kinds of situations. Ever since Zion has overcome his disability and is now making an impact on the world, he said he owes everything to his foster mom, Kimberly. He made an appearance on the famous Ellen Show and said, "If it weren't for Kimberly, I'd be in a very bad place at this point in my life, and that I'm doing everything I am doing right now to give my mom a better house, a better car, and better living conditions because she deserves so much more than she has right now." Zion, at the beginning of his life, was his own barrier, and that he broke that barrier, showing anything is possible even for a person with a disability like his.